The sky had turned the color of a fresh bruise when Hattie Voss threw open the cellar door and fell down the wooden stairs into the darkness below. Her heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Above ground, the world had gone silent in that terrible way that meant the tornado was close, that eerie quiet before the monster arrived to tear everything apart. She had been riding fence lines on the Mackenzie property when she spotted the funnel cloud dropping from the sky like God's own fist, and this cellar had been the only shelter for miles. She did not know whose land she was on now, only that the old wooden door had given way when she yanked it, and now she crouched in the dirt-floored darkness, pressing her back against the rough stone wall, trying to catch her breath. The roar started then, a sound like 1,000 freight trains bearing down at once, and the cellar door above rattled violently against its hinges. Dust sifted down from the ceiling beams. Hattie wrapped her arms around her knees and made herself small, her pointed ears flat against her skull, her small tusks pressing into her lower lip as she clenched her jaw. She was an orc woman alone on the frontier, and she had survived plenty already, but there was something about tornadoes that made even the toughest souls feel small. The wind screamed overhead, and she could hear things breaking, crashing, being torn apart and flung away. She closed her eyes and waited. It could have been 5 minutes or 50 before the sound finally passed, moving east with its terrible appetite. Hattie waited longer still, counting her breaths, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain from her muscles. When she finally stood on shaking legs, her green skin was covered in dust, and her leather vest had torn at the shoulder. She climbed the stairs carefully and pushed at the cellar door. It did not budge. She pushed harder, putting her shoulder into it, using the strength in her athletic frame. Something heavy had fallen across the door, or the twister had warped the wood, or both. She was trapped. Hattie took a breath and tried not to panic. Someone would come eventually. Whoever owned this cellar would come to check on their property after the storm passed. She just had to wait. She settled back down on the stairs and took stock of her surroundings as her eyes adjusted. The cellar was well made, with stone walls and solid timber supports. Shelves lined one wall, stocked with preserved goods in glass jars. Potatoes and onions filled wooden crates. A lantern hung from a hook, and after some fumbling, Hattie got it lit. The warm glow revealed more details, the careful organization, the cleanliness despite the dirt floor. Whoever lived here took pride in their preparations. Hours passed. The light from the cracks around the door frame faded as evening approached. Hattie tried the door twice more, but it would not give. She was starting to consider her options, trying to dig out perhaps, or breaking through the shelving to see if there was another way out, when she heard footsteps above. Heavy footsteps. Running. The weight on the door scraped away with a groan of wood on wood, and suddenly the door flew open, revealing the dark sky of early evening and a man silhouetted against it. He froze when he saw her. Hattie raised her hands slowly, showing she meant no harm. She had learned that gesture well in her years on the frontier. "The storm," she said quickly. "I needed shelter. I did not mean to trespass." The man did not move for a long moment. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes covered in mud and debris. His dark hair was disheveled, and even in the dim light, Hattie could see his chest heaving like he had been running hard. His hands were shaking. "Please," Hattie said, keeping her voice level. "I will leave. I apologize for the intrusion." The man made a sound then, something between a sob and a gasp, and his knees seemed to give out. He sat down hard on the ground beside the open cellar door, dropping his head into his hands. Hattie climbed the stairs slowly, emerging into the evening air. The smell of rain and torn earth filled her nose. Around them, The homestead was devastated. The barn had been reduced to scattered planks and twisted metal. The chicken coop was simply gone. The house still stood, but its roof had partially caved in and debris littered the yard. A wagon lay on its side 50 yards away. The man was trembling violently now, his whole body shaking with the aftermath of terror. Hattie understood then. He had come home to find this destruction, and he had thought someone was in his cellar, trapped or hurt or worse. The relief and the fear were hitting him all at once. She crouched down a few feet away from him, not too close, not threatening. "I am fine," she said gently. "The cellar is solid. You built it well." He looked up at her then, and she saw his face properly for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with strong features and gray eyes that were currently red-rimmed and wild. Those eyes traveled over her, taking in her green skin, her tusks, her pointed ears, and she waited for the familiar reactions, disgust or fear or anger. Instead, he just nodded shakily. "I thought," he started, his voice rough. "I thought you were dead. I saw the door was blocked, and I thought someone was trapped down there, and I ran so fast. I thought I was too late." His hands were still shaking badly. "I am Hattie Voss," she said. "I work for the Mackenzie Ranch about 5 miles north. I was riding fence when the storm came. Your cellar saved my life." "Jacob Whitmore," he said automatically. Then he seemed to realize he was still sitting in the mud, and he tried to stand, but his legs were not cooperating yet. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard. Hattie made a decision. She could see he was alone here and in shock, and night was falling. "Let me help you inside," she offered. "You should sit down properly, maybe drink some water." Jacob looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are offering to help me. You are the one who was trapped. You are the one who is shaking so hard you cannot stand," Hattie pointed out. "And it is your home that just got torn apart. Come on." She held out her hand. After a moment he took it, and she pulled him to his feet. He was heavier than she expected, solid with muscle, but she was strong enough to steady him. Together they picked their way across the debris-strewn yard to the house. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the damage was less severe than it had looked from outside. The main room was intact, though wind had blown rain through the broken windows and scattered papers and small objects everywhere. The roof had caved in over what looked like a bedroom, but the kitchen and sitting area were sound. Hattie guided Jacob to a chair at the solid wooden table and found a cup, filling it from the water pump at the kitchen sink. He drank it mechanically, and she could see his hands slowly steadying. The color was returning to his face. "I should go," Hattie said. "Let you deal with all this." "It is almost full dark," Jacob said, looking at the window. "And your horse," Hattie grimaced. She had tied her mount to a fence post when she ran for the cellar, but that fence was probably scattered across the county now. Gone, most likely, or headed home without me. "Then you cannot leave tonight. It is not safe, and it is too far to walk in the dark." He stood up steadier now and looked around at his damaged home. "I have a guest room. Well, I had a guest room before the roof fell in on it, but the couch is dry. I could not impose after barging into your cellar." "You saved your own life by barging into my cellar," Jacob said. "And honestly, I do not want to be alone right now." He said it simply, without shame, and Hattie felt something in her chest tighten at his honesty. She nodded. "Then I will stay. But let me help you secure the house first. Those windows need to be boarded before the night animals get curious." They worked together as darkness fell completely, finding planks from the destroyed barn and nailing them over the broken windows. Jacob moved mechanically at first, still in shock, but gradually his natural competence returned. He was a man used to working with his hands, and the familiar task seemed to ground him. Hattie noticed he had a slight limp, favoring his left leg, and there were old scars on his forearms visible when he rolled up his sleeves. When they finally finished, they were both exhausted. Jacob lit several lanterns, casting warm light through the main room, and searched through his pantry for something to serve as dinner. He came up with bread, cheese, and dried meat, which they ate at the table while rain began to fall softly outside, the storm's gentler aftermath. "I have been here 2 years," Jacob said quietly, breaking the silence. "Built most of it myself. The barn took me 3 months. He looked toward the window, though the boards blocked any view of the destruction outside. "I suppose I will be building it again. You did the work yourself?" Hattie asked. "That is impressive. I needed a project, something to focus on." He did not elaborate, and Hattie did not push. She recognized the tone of a man who had needed to rebuild more than just a barn. "The house is solid," she offered. "The roof can be repaired." "You have good bones to work with." Jacob looked at her then, really looked at her, and Hattie prepared herself for whatever comment was coming about her appearance, about her kind. But he just said, "Thank you for staying. I know you do not know me, and I know," he gestured vaguely at her, "that trusting a human stranger is probably not high on your list of comfortable choices." Hattie felt herself relax slightly. At least he was aware of the dynamic. "You have not given me reason to distrust you yet." "Yet," Jacob repeated with a faint, tired smile. "I appreciate the qualification. Keeps me honest." Despite everything, Hattie found herself almost smiling back. There was something disarming about his frankness, his willingness to acknowledge the awkwardness of their situation rather than pretending it did not exist. He set her up on the couch with blankets and a pillow, apologizing for the accommodations. Hattie assured him it was far better than sleeping in the cellar or trying to walk home in the dark. Jacob retreated to his bedroom, or what was left of it, calling out that he would be sleeping on the floor in there since half the room was open to the sky now. Hattie lay on the couch in the darkness, listening to the gentle rain and the unfamiliar sounds of a strange house settling around her. She should feel more uncomfortable than she did. She was alone in a human man's home, far from anyone who knew where she was. If he meant her harm, no one would know to look for her here. But she did not feel afraid. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something about the way Jacob had looked when he opened that cellar door, the raw relief and terror in his face when he realized she was alive. That had not been the look of a man who saw her as a monster or an enemy. That had been the look of someone who could not bear the thought of finding another person hurt. She fell asleep wondering what had brought Jacob Whitmore to this lonely homestead, what he was rebuilding himself from, and why the thought of someone dying in his cellar had nearly broken him. Morning came bright and clear, the world washed clean by rain. Hattie woke to the smell of coffee and found Jacob already up, standing in the yard surveying the damage in full daylight. It looked worse than it had in the dark. The barn was truly obliterated. Fencing was down in every direction. The chicken coop was gone, though Hattie spotted a few bedraggled chickens pecking around the debris, having somehow survived. Jacob was drinking coffee from a tin cup, his expression distant. Hattie approached carefully, not wanting to startle him. "Morning," he said without turning. "Coffee is inside if you want it." She fetched a cup and joined him. They stood together in silence, taking in the scope of the work ahead. "I should head back to the Mackenzie place," Hattie said finally. "Let them know I am alive. They will be wondering." "Of course," Jacob said. "I can lend you a horse. My mare made it through somehow, found her in the far pasture this morning." "I will bring her back in a day or two," Hattie promised. "I trust you," Jacob said simply. Something about those words made Hattie's chest feel tight again. Trust was not something humans usually offered her freely. She prepared to leave but found herself hesitating. Will you be all right here alone? This is a lot of work. Jacob looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. I will manage, I have before. I could come back, Hattie heard herself say. Tomorrow or the next day, help with the cleanup. I owe you for the shelter. You do not owe me anything. Then I am offering as a neighbor. Jacob studied her for a long moment. I would appreciate the help, he admitted. But only if the Mackenzies can spare you. I do not want to cause trouble with your employer. They will understand. Storm damage affects everyone out here. We all help each other rebuild. It was the code of the frontier, the unspoken rule that kept isolated homesteaders alive. When disaster struck, you helped your neighbors because someday you would need that help too. The fact that she was an orc and he was human should not matter, though Hattie knew that in practice it often did. Jacob nodded slowly. Then yes, I would be grateful for the help. Hattie rode out an hour later on Jacob's steady bay mare, following the road north toward the Mackenzie ranch. The landscape was scarred by the tornado's path, a trail of destruction cutting across the prairie like a giant claw mark. She saw other damaged homesteads in the distance and made mental notes of who would need help. The Mackenzies were relieved to see her alive. Old Tom Mackenzie, the ranch owner, had been about to send out a search party. Hattie explained where she had sheltered and offered to help with the Mackenzie storm damage, but Tom waved her off. We got lucky, just lost some fencing and shingles. That Whitmore place, though, I heard it got hit bad. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. Strange fellow, that one. Keeps to himself, but he does good work when he comes into town, never causes trouble. He offered me shelter for the night, Hattie said. He is a good man. Tom gave her a searching look. You thinking of going back there to help? I offered. He has a lot of damage to repair. Tom did not say anything more, but Hattie could read the concern in his face. An orc woman and a human man working alone together, even if it was just cleanup work. People would talk, they always did. I will be careful, Hattie said quietly. I know you will, girl, you always are. Tom sighed. Take what supplies you need, and take one of the horses, that bay of his needs to get home. You do good work, Hattie, just watch yourself. The warning was kind, but it stung anyway. Hattie had been watching herself her whole life. She returned to Jacob's homestead the next morning with a pack horse loaded with extra tools, nails, and rope. Jacob was already hard at work clearing debris, hauling broken boards into organized piles. He looked up when she arrived, and the smile that crossed his face was genuine and warm. You came back. I said I would. They fell into an easy rhythm of work. Jacob was a meticulous planner, assessing each area of damage and prioritizing repairs. The house roof came first, then the fencing to keep his few remaining cattle from wandering. The barn would take weeks to rebuild properly, but they could construct a temporary shelter for the animals. As they worked, they talked. Not constantly, but in the comfortable pauses between tasks, sharing small pieces of themselves. Hattie learned that Jacob had been a soldier, that he had seen combat in the border wars 3 years ago, that he had come to this homestead seeking peace and isolation after mustering out. The limp was from a leg wound that had not healed quite right. The scars on his arms were from shrapnel. I could not go back to my family's farm, he said, hammering in a nail with precise strikes. Too many people, too much noise. I needed space to think, or maybe space to stop thinking. I am not sure which. Hattie understood that better than he knew. She shared her own story carefully, leaving out the worst parts. She had been born in an orc settlement to the west, but had never quite fit in. Too curious about humans, too willing to see the good in them when her clan saw only enemies. When she fell in love with a human trader at 16, and her clan found out, they had cast her out. The trader had not wanted her once his own people started whispering. She had made her way alone ever since, finding work where she could, proving herself over and over. "That is a hell of a thing to survive," Jacob said quietly. "Being that young and losing everything, I survived. That is what matters. It is more than surviving, though, is it not? You built a life. You kept going." He looked at her with those steady gray eyes. "That takes real strength." No one had ever quite put it that way before. Hattie felt heat rise in her cheeks, her green skin darkening slightly. "You did the same, after the war." "I suppose we are both builders, then, of barns and of lives." They worked through the day, breaking only for water and a quick meal at midday. The physical labor felt good, purposeful. Hattie found herself watching Jacob when he was not looking, noticing the way he moved despite his injury, the care he took with each task, the small kindnesses he showed to his animals when he checked on them. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, they stood together on the partially repaired roof, surveying their progress. They had patched the worst of the damage, enough to keep out rain and varmints. It was not beautiful, but it was functional. "You are good at this," Jacob said. "Building, I mean." "Did you learn from your clan?" "Some. And some I learned by trying and failing and trying again." Hattie wiped sweat from her forehead. "You are a good teacher, patient. I am just glad to have the help. And the company," he admitted. "It gets lonely out here sometimes." Hattie knew that loneliness well. She started to respond, but a sound stopped her. Hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching fast. They climbed down from the roof as 3 riders appeared, coming up the road from the direction of town. Jacob tensed beside her, and Hattie felt her own shoulders tighten. Visitors out here were rarely casual, especially arriving at speed. The riders pulled up in the yard, kicking up dust. 2 men and a woman, all human, all wearing the rough clothes of homesteaders. The man in front, heavy-set with a thick beard, looked from Jacob to Hattie with undisguised suspicion. "Whitmore," he said, not dismounting. "Heard you had some storm damage. Came to check if you needed help." His eyes lingered on Hattie. "Seems you have already got help." "This is Hattie Voss," Jacob said, his voice carefully neutral. "She works for Tom Mackenzie. She took shelter here during the storm and offered to help with repairs." "That right?" The bearded man's expression did not soften. "Mighty friendly of her." The woman rider, lean and weathered, spoke up. "We heard you were working with an orc, Jacob. Wanted to see if everything was all right here." The implication was clear. They had come to make sure Jacob was not being threatened or taken advantage of by the orc woman on his property. The fact that Hattie was half his size and he was a trained soldier apparently did not factor into their assessment. "Everything is fine," Jacob said firmly. "Hattie has been a tremendous help. I would still be digging myself out without her." "You sure about that?" The third rider, a young man barely out of his teens, jerked his chin toward Hattie. "Could be she is just looking for an opportunity. Her kind is tricky." Hattie kept her expression neutral, though anger burned in her chest. This was not the first time she had heard such things, and it would not be the last. She knew better than to show reaction. It only made things worse. "Her kind." Jacob's voice had gone cold. "You mean a neighbor who helps out after a disaster? That kind?" The bearded man held up a hand. "Now, Jacob, no need to get defensive. We are just looking out for you. You have been alone out here a long time. Maybe you are not thinking clearly about the risks." "I think very clearly, Robert. And what I see is 3 people implying insults about someone who has done nothing but help me. If you came to offer assistance, I appreciate it, but I have the situation in hand. If you came to cause trouble, I will ask you to leave my property." The tension in the yard could have been cut with a knife. Hattie remained very still, aware that any movement on her part might be seen as threatening. She had been in situations like this before. The best strategy was to be quiet, be small, Let the humans work it out among themselves. But Jacob was not backing down. His posture had shifted, and despite the casual clothes and the limp, Hattie could suddenly see the soldier he had been. There was steel in his spine and ice in his voice. Robert studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. Your property, your choice. Just know that people are talking. An orc woman coming and going from a bachelor's homestead, it raises questions." "Let them talk," Jacob said flatly. The riders left, though not without a few more hostile glances at Hattie. When they were out of sight, Jacob turned to her, and she saw fury in his face that was not directed at her. "I am sorry," he said tightly. "That was unacceptable." "It is what I am used to," Hattie said, aiming for casual and not quite hitting it. "Well, you should not be. You should not have to be used to being treated like that." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "God, sometimes I hate people." "You defended me," Hattie said quietly. "Most would not. Most should. You were doing nothing but helping a neighbor. That should not require defending." He looked at her, and his expression softened. "Are you all right?" The fact that he asked meant more than Hattie wanted to admit. "I am fine. But they had a point about one thing. People will talk if I keep coming here. Let them talk. It could cause trouble for you. For your standing in the community." "I do not have much standing to lose," Jacob said. "And I do not care what they think anyway. I came out here to get away from judging eyes and small minds. I am not going to let them dictate who helps me or who I spend time with." Hattie wanted to argue, to point out the practical realities of their situation. But another part of her, a part she had tried to lock away years ago, felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. Here was a man who saw her as a person, not a monster, who defended her to his own kind, who seemed to genuinely value her presence. That part of her was dangerous. That part of her could get hurt again. "I should probably head back to the Mackenzie place," she said, not meeting his eyes. "It is getting late." Jacob looked like he wanted to say something else, but he just nodded. "Thank you for today. Really, I could not have done this without you. I will come back tomorrow if you want, to finish the fencing." "I want that very much," Jacob said, "but only if you are comfortable with it. I do not want to cause you trouble either." Hattie managed a small smile. "I will see you tomorrow then." She rode back to the Mackenzie ranch as the sun set, her mind churning. She should probably stop going to Jacob's homestead. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to keep her distance, avoid giving the gossips ammunition, protect herself from the inevitable pain of caring about someone who would eventually realize that being associated with an orc was too costly. But when morning came, she packed up supplies and headed back to his homestead anyway. The pattern continued for weeks. Hattie would finish her work at the Mackenzie ranch and ride over to Jacob's place, spending afternoons and evenings helping with repairs. The house roof was finished properly. The fencing was restored. They began framing out the new barn, a project that would take months but was deeply satisfying in its steady progress. They talked more as they worked, sharing stories and opinions and comfortable silences. Jacob had a dry sense of humor that caught Hattie off guard and made her laugh. Hattie had practical wisdom from years of hard living that Jacob listened to with genuine respect. He asked her advice on everything from fence construction to which crops would do best in his soil, treating her input as valuable rather than humoring her. He never touched her inappropriately, always maintained respectful distance, but Hattie found herself hyper-aware of his presence anyway. The way his hands looked as he worked, the sound of his voice when he called her name, the rare, genuine smiles he gave when she made him laugh. This was dangerous territory. She knew it, but she could not seem to stop herself from returning day after day. The gossip in the area grew. Hattie heard it from other ranch hands, saw it in the way people looked at her when she went into town for supplies. The orc woman and Jacob Whitmore, spending all that time alone together. What were they really doing out there? It was unnatural. Someone should do something. Tom Mackenzie called her into his office one evening, his weathered face concerned. "Hattie, I need to talk to you about this Whitmore situation." "We are just rebuilding his homestead," Hattie said, keeping her voice level. "Nothing inappropriate is happening." "I believe you, girl. But it does not matter what the truth is. It matters what people think. And people are starting to talk in ways that could get ugly." He sighed heavily. "I am worried about you. Both of you, really. Whitmore is a decent man, but he does not seem to understand how dangerous this could be." "Dangerous how?" "There are people around here who do not like the idea of humans and orcs getting friendly. Some of them are just gossips, but some are meaner than that. I do not want to see either of you get hurt because you are naive about how the world works." "I am not naive," Hattie said quietly. "I know exactly how the world works. I have known my whole life." "Then why are you taking this risk?" Hattie did not have a good answer for that. Or rather, she did, but it was not one she wanted to say out loud. Because Jacob made her feel seen. Because working beside him felt right in a way nothing had in years. Because she was tired of living her whole life carefully, always worried about what others thought. "He is my friend," she said finally. "Is that not allowed?" Tom's expression was pained. "In a better world, yes. In this one, it is complicated." "Everything about my life is complicated," Hattie said. "At least this complication is my choice." She kept going to Jacob's homestead, but she was more cautious now, more aware of being watched. Jacob noticed her tension and asked about it, and she told him about her conversation with Tom. He listened with a deepening frown. "I hate that you have to live like this," he said when she finished. "Always worried, always being judged. It is the reality. It should not be." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "If you want to stop coming here, I would understand. I do not want you to suffer consequences because of me." "Do you want me to stop coming?" "No," he said immediately. "I look forward to your visits. You are, honestly, the best part of my day. But I do not want to be selfish about this." The best part of his day. Hattie felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. She should make an excuse, put distance between them before this went any further. Instead, she heard herself say, "I will keep coming. Unless you change your mind about wanting me here." "I will not change my mind," Jacob said softly. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Hattie saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Want. Longing. The same things she was feeling. Dangerous things. She turned back to the barn framing, picking up her hammer with hands that were not quite steady. "We should finish this before dark." "Right," Jacob said, his voice a little rough. "Before dark." They did not speak about it again, but something had shifted between them. There was a new awareness, a tension that was not quite uncomfortable but was definitely charged. Hattie caught Jacob watching her sometimes, his expression unguarded, and had to look away before she did something foolish. Autumn arrived, painting the prairie in gold and rust. The barn was nearly finished, a testament to their combined work. Jacob's homestead looked almost normal again, though the new wood stood out pale against the weathered old. They had done good work together. Hattie knew she should probably stop coming around so often now that the major repairs were done. There was no practical reason for her to be there every day anymore. But Jacob kept finding projects, and she kept agreeing to help with them, and neither of them acknowledged that they were making excuses to spend time together. The weather turned cold in early November. Hattie arrived one evening to find Jacob splitting firewood, building up his supply for winter. She joined him without asking, falling into the rhythm of the work. They were stacking the split logs when Jacob suddenly stopped, looking toward the road. "Someone is coming," he said. Hattie followed his gaze and felt her stomach sink. A group of riders, at least 6 of them, approaching at a purposeful pace. She recognized Robert, the bearded man from before, in the lead. "Maybe you should go inside," Jacob said quietly. "I will not hide," Hattie said, though her heart was hammering. The riders pulled up in a semicircle, blocking the road. They all had weapons, rifles in saddle holsters and knives on their belts. This was not a friendly visit. "Whitmore," Robert said, "we need to talk." "Then talk," Jacob replied, his voice level but his posture shifting into something defensive. Hattie moved closer to him without thinking about it. "We have tried to give you the benefit of the doubt," Robert continued. "Tried to believe you were just being neighborly, helping out the orc woman, whatever story you were telling. But it has gone on too long. People are getting uncomfortable." "People should mind their own business," Jacob said. "It is our business when you are bringing shame to the community. A human man and an orc woman carrying on together, it is wrong, it is against nature." "We are not carrying on," Jacob said tightly. "We are friends, we work together. That is all." "That is all for now," one of the other riders said, "but everyone knows where it is heading. You are going to ruin yourself, Whitmore, and you are going to encourage other orcs to think they can mingle with decent folk." Hattie felt anger and shame burning in equal measure. This was exactly what she had feared, what she had known would happen. She should never have kept coming here. She should have protected Jacob from this. "Hattie Voss is more decent than anyone in this group," Jacob said, his voice hard as stone. "She helped me rebuild when I needed it. She has worked harder than any of you lazy gossips, and if you are uncomfortable with that, that is your problem, not ours." "Watch your mouth, Whitmore," Robert warned. "You might have been a soldier, but there are 6 of us and 1 of you." "And 1 of me," Hattie said, stepping forward. She was scared, but she was also furious. "If you have a problem with me, say it to my face instead of hiding behind your mob." "We do not have a problem with you staying in your place," another rider said. "But you need to leave this man alone. Stop corrupting him with your presence." "She is not corrupting anyone," Jacob snapped. "And if you think I am going to let you threaten her on my property, you are out of your minds." "We are not threatening," Robert said. "We are warning, both of you. This needs to stop now before someone gets hurt." "Is that a threat?" Jacob demanded. "It is a fact. People are angry." "I came here to tell you that because I actually do not want to see anyone hurt, but my patience is running thin. Send the orc away, Whitmore. Keep her away, or there will be consequences." "Get off my property," Jacob said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "Now." The riders stared him down for a long moment. Then Robert nodded slowly. "Have it your way, but do not say we did not warn you." They rode off, leaving Jacob and Hattie standing in the yard, both breathing hard with anger and adrenaline. "I am so sorry," Hattie said immediately. "This is my fault. I should have stopped coming." "This is not your fault," Jacob said fiercely. "This is their fault for being bigots and bullies. You have done nothing wrong." "But they are right about one thing. This will only get worse. People will not accept us being friends." "Then they do not have to accept it. I do not care what they think, Hattie. You should care. They could burn your homestead, kill your livestock, drive you out. I have seen it happen before, Jacob. When humans and orcs get too close, when people disapprove, things get violent. Then we will be careful. Being careful is not enough." She was close to shouting now, frustration and fear spilling over. "I cannot keep coming here. It is not safe, for either of us." "So that is it." Jacob's eyes were blazing. "You are just going to walk away because some narrow-minded fools do not like the idea of us being friends." "Yes, because I am trying to protect you." "I do not need your protection. I need—" He stopped, running both hands through his hair. "I need you to stay. I need you to not disappear from my life because I have gotten used to you being in it and I do not want to go back to being alone out here." Hattie stared at him. "Jacob!" "I know," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I know it is selfish. I know I should be noble and tell you to go for your own safety. But I am not that noble, Hattie. I want you to stay. Even if it is stupid, even if it causes problems. I want you here." Everything Hattie had been trying to keep locked away came flooding up at once. All the careful walls she had built, all the defenses crumbling in the face of his raw honesty. "I want to stay," she whispered. "That is the problem. I want to stay so much it scares me." Jacob closed the distance between them in 2 steps. He did not touch her, but he was close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the scent of wood smoke and sawdust that always clung to him. "Why does it scare you?" "Because of what it means. Because wanting to stay is not the same as just working together. Wanting to stay means I care about you in ways I should not, in ways that will make everything more complicated and more dangerous." "What if I care about you the same way?" Jacob asked quietly. "What if I have been lying to myself for months, pretending this was just friendship, when really I look forward to seeing you every day like it is a physical need? What if I find excuses to keep you here longer? What if I think about you when you are gone?" Hattie's breath caught. "Jacob, we cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am an orc and you are human and the world does not allow for what you are talking about." "The world can go to hell," Jacob said bluntly. "I am tired of living my life according to what other people think is acceptable. I fought in a war I did not believe in because it was expected. I nearly died because someone else decided my life was expendable. I came out here to find peace, and I found something better. I found you. And I am not going to pretend I do not care about you just because it makes other people uncomfortable." Hattie felt tears pricking at her eyes. "You do not understand what you are asking for. If people even suspect there is something between us, something romantic, it will not just be threats and warnings. They will come for us. They will destroy everything you have built. Then I will build it again. With you. You are being naive, maybe. Or maybe I am being brave for the first time in years." He lifted his hand slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing over her green skin with infinite tenderness. "I am falling in love with you, Hattie Voss. Maybe I already fell, and I do not care that it is inconvenient or dangerous or socially unacceptable. I just care that it is true." Hattie closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every instinct telling her this was a mistake. "I care about you too, so much, but I am terrified." "I am terrified too," Jacob admitted, "but I am more terrified of letting you walk away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if." She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who defended her to his own community, who looked at her green skin and tusks and pointed ears and saw someone beautiful, who was offering her something she had thought she could never have. "If we do this," she said slowly, "it will not be easy. It might be the hardest thing either of us ever does. I know. People will try to tear us apart. Let them try. We might lose everything. I already lost everything once in the war I survived. I will survive again if I have to, but I do not want to survive anymore, Hattie. I want to live with you." Hattie made her decision. It was reckless and possibly stupid and definitely dangerous, but it was hers. She rose up on her toes and kissed him, gentle and brief, just a brush of lips that sent electricity through her entire body. When she pulled back, Jacob was staring at her with wonder. "Was that okay?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "That was more than okay," he breathed. Then he kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. Hattie melted into him, into the warmth and strength and rightness of it. She had been so alone for so long, and suddenly she was not alone anymore. They broke apart breathless, and Jacob pressed his forehead to hers. "Stay tonight," he said. "Not just on the couch, stay with me." "Yes," Hattie said, because she was done being careful. Done protecting herself from hurt by refusing to live. If the world was going to judge her either way, she might as well be judged for choosing happiness. They went inside hand in hand as full darkness fell. Jacob built up the fire while Hattie lit the lanterns, domestic tasks that felt different now, weighted with new meaning. They were not just friends anymore. They were not just neighbors. They were choosing each other, consequences be damned. That night, wrapped in Jacob's arms in his bed, Hattie let herself believe that maybe love could be enough. That maybe two people who cared about each other deeply enough could build something that would withstand the world's disapproval. It was naive, perhaps, but it was also hope. And hope was something she had been without for too long. The next weeks were some of the happiest of Hattie's life. She and Jacob stopped pretending their relationship was anything other than what it was. She moved most of her belongings to his homestead, keeping only a few things at the Mackenzie ranch. Tom was not pleased, but he did not fire her either, just warned her to be careful and to come to him if she needed help. Jacob and Hattie worked the homestead together, preparing for winter. They stocked the cellar with preserved foods. They insulated the barn. They cut firewood until they had enough to last through the coldest months. Every task was better for being shared. At night, they lay together in the warmth of the house, talking about everything and nothing. Jacob told her about his childhood on a farm downstate, about his parents who had died of fever when he was young, about the war and what it had cost him. Hattie told him about her clan, about the beauty of Orc traditions she still missed, about the traitor who had broken her heart, about all the small kindnesses and cruelties she had experienced in her years alone. They learned each other's bodies with patient exploration, discovering what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp or sigh. Hattie had been with exactly one person before, the traitor who had abandoned her, and that had been fumbling and quick. With Jacob, everything was different. He was attentive, generous, treating her like she was precious. She learned to trust his touch, to believe that he found her beautiful even with her green skin and tusks, but they could not hide in their happiness forever. The outside world kept intruding in town. People stopped talking to Jacob. Merchants served him but without friendliness. Former acquaintances crossed the street to avoid him. He was being shunned slowly but surely for his choice to be with an Orc woman. Hattie faced worse. She was spat at in the street, called names, shoved hard enough to stumble when she passed a group of men outside the saloon. She did not tell Jacob about the worst of it, not wanting to prove his critics right about the dangers they faced. Then came the night someone threw a torch into their haystack, setting it ablaze. Jacob and Hattie woke to the smell of smoke and ran outside to find fire eating through their carefully stored winter feed. They managed to put it out before it spread to the barn, but the damage was done. Weeks of work gone, and the message was clear: you are not welcome here. Jacob wanted to go to the sheriff, but Hattie talked him out of it. The sheriff was one of the men who had been in Robert's group making threats. He would not help them, might even tell them they brought it on themselves. "We should leave," Hattie said as they stood in the charred remains of their haystack, gray in the morning light. "Go somewhere else, somewhere no one knows us." "This is my home," Jacob said. "I built it with my own hands. I am not letting them drive me off. What if they do worse next time? What if they hurt you or burn the house with us inside?" Jacob's jaw was tight. "Then we will fight. We cannot fight a whole community, Jacob. There are too many of them." "Then what do you suggest? That we just give up, go our separate ways?" No, the thought of losing him was unbearable. "We stay together, but we go somewhere safer." Jacob looked at the homestead, at everything they had built together. Hattie could see the war in his face, the desire to stand his ground versus the practical reality of their situation. Before he could answer, they heard horses approaching. Both of them tensed, preparing for another confrontation. But it was not Robert's mob. It was Tom Mackenzie riding alone. He dismounted slowly, his weathered face grave. "Heard about the fire. Came to check on you both." "We are fine," Jacob said, his tone not welcoming. "If you came to tell us I told you so, you can leave." "Actually, I came to help," Tom said. He pulled a piece of paper from his coat. "I have a cousin, lives about 200 miles north near the territorial border. He has a big spread, always looking for good help. I wrote him about you too. He says he would be happy to have you, no questions asked about your situation." Hattie and Jacob looked at each other. 200 miles, far enough that no one would know them, far enough to start fresh. "We would have to leave everything," Jacob said. "You would have to leave the buildings," Tom corrected. "But you could take your animals, your tools, your belongings, and you would be alive and together. That is worth more than wood and nails." Jacob turned to Hattie. "What do you want to do?" She looked around at the homestead they had rebuilt together. It was beautiful work, good work, but it was just a place. Jacob was what mattered. Their safety was what mattered. "I want to go north," she said. "I want to build a life somewhere we do not have to be afraid all the time." Jacob nodded slowly. "Then we go north." They spent the next week preparing. Jacob sold his land to a family moving into the area, getting far less than it was worth but needing the money for their journey. They packed what they could carry, said quiet goodbyes to the few friends they had. Tom helped them load a wagon and promised to keep an eye on things until the new owners arrived. The morning they left, Jacob stood in front of his house one last time, his face showing the grief of leaving. Hattie took his hand. "We will build something new," she said softly. "Together." "I know," Jacob said. "It is just hard to leave." "I know that too. I have been leaving my whole life." She squeezed his hand. "But this time I am leaving with someone, not alone. That makes all the difference." They climbed onto the wagon and started north. Behind them, the homestead grew smaller and disappeared. Ahead was unknown territory, uncertain welcome, the possibility of failure. But they had each other. And somehow that was enough. The journey north took 2 weeks. They traveled slowly, mindful of the animals, camping at night under the vast prairie sky. Some nights were bitterly cold, and they huddled together in their bedrolls, sharing warmth. Other nights were surprisingly mild, and they sat by the fire talking late into the evening. They passed other homesteads, other travelers. Most paid them little mind, too focused on their own concerns. A few stared at Hattie with suspicion or disgust, but no one bothered them. They were just 2 more people on the frontier trying to make their way. As they traveled further north, the landscape changed. The flat prairie gave way to rolling hills, then to forest edges. The air smelled different, sharper with pine. They saw fewer settlements, more wilderness. It felt like the edge of the world. Tom's cousin, Martin Weaver, met them at the border of his land. He was an older man, grizzled and practical, who looked them both over with assessing eyes and then nodded once. "Tom says you are hard workers who got a raw deal down south. I do not care about your circumstances. I care about results. You do good work, you will be treated fair. That acceptable?" "That is more than acceptable," Jacob said. "Good, I will show you to your place." Their place turned out to be a small cabin about a mile from the main ranch house, nestled in a clearing surrounded by tall pines. It was basic but solid, 1 room with a sleeping loft, a good stove, and a well out front. Behind it was a small barn for their animals and space for a garden come spring. "It is not much," Martin said, "but it is yours as long as you work for me." "I need help with the horses mainly and general ranch work." "Your woman," he nodded at Hattie. "Tom says she is good with stock, can always use another set of skilled hands. She has a name, Jacob said, an edge in his voice. Hattie Voss, and yes, she is excellent with animals. Martin looked at Hattie with something like respect. Hattie, then. You are both welcome here. I run a fair operation, and I do not tolerate gossip or troublemaking. Anyone gives you grief, you let me know. It was better than they had dared hope for. A place to live, work to do, and protection from at least the immediate consequences of their relationship. They settled in quickly, falling into the rhythms of ranch life. The work was hard but satisfying, and Martin was true to his word about running a fair operation. The other ranch hands were wary of Hattie at first, but she won them over with competence and quiet professionalism. She had a gift with horses especially, able to gentle the most skittish animals. Within a month, even the most skeptical workers grudgingly admitted she knew what she was doing. Winter came early that far north, deep snow and bitter cold. Jacob and Hattie insulated their cabin and stocked it well, preparing to ride out the worst months. On the coldest nights, when the wind howled around the walls, they lay together in the loft, grateful for the warmth and safety in each other. You regret it? Hattie asked one night, her head on Jacob's chest. Leaving your homestead? Everything you built? No, Jacob said without hesitation. I regret that I had to leave. I regret that people are small-minded and cruel, but I do not regret choosing you. I would make the same choice 1,000 times, even though it cost you everything. It did not cost me everything. It cost me a place, but I gained you. That is a trade I would make every single time. He kissed the top of her head. Do you regret it, being with me, the trouble it has caused? No, Hattie said. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere, not to a place but to a person, to you. That is worth every hardship. They married in the spring, a simple ceremony performed by Martin's wife in the clearing behind their cabin. There was no official record, no legal document that would be recognized in most places. Humans and orcs marrying was not accepted in the eyes of the law or the church. But Martin's wife, a practical woman named Ruth, spoke the words anyway, binding them together in the eyes of God if not the government. I do not care what any law says, Ruth declared when she pronounced them married. You two are more committed to each other than half the legal couples I know. Your love is valid, and I am honored to witness it. Hattie wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, white cotton with small blue flowers embroidered at the collar. Jacob wore his best shirt and pants, cleaned and pressed. They spoke their vows to each other with voices that shook with emotion, promising to love and protect each other no matter what came. When Jacob kissed his bride, Hattie felt tears streaming down her face, her tusks pressing against his lips in a way that was uniquely theirs. She had never thought she would have this, a wedding, a husband, a future. And now here it was, solid and real and hers. The ranch hands threw them a small celebration, music and dancing and more food than two people could eat. It was the acceptance Hattie had never experienced before, being welcomed into a community despite her green skin and pointed ears. Some of the hands still kept their distance, uncomfortable with the mixed marriage, but most seemed willing to judge her on her character rather than her species. That night, alone in their cabin, Jacob and Hattie made love as husband and wife, the words still new and precious on their tongues. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Jacob traced patterns on her green skin with gentle fingers. I love you, he said simply. My wife. I love you, Hattie whispered back. My husband. Summer came, and they planted a garden behind their cabin. Hattie had a gift for growing things, and soon they had neat rows of vegetables thriving in the northern soil. Jacob built a chicken coop, and they acquired hens, adding fresh eggs to their supplies. Little by little, they were building a life. Martin gave them more responsibilities as they proved themselves, trusting them with important tasks. Jacob became the head wrangler, managing the ranch's sizable horse herd. Hattie trained the young horses, her patience and skill making her invaluable. They were not just laborers anymore. They were essential members of the ranch operation. News from the south was sporadic but concerning. The tension between humans and orcs was growing worse, with violence breaking out in several frontier towns. There was talk of the territorial government passing laws to forbid interspecies relationships, to formalize the segregation that already existed in practice. Jacob and Hattie listened to these reports with tight throats, grateful they had left when they did. A year passed, then two. Their cabin became a true home, filled with small comforts and shared memories. Hattie carved decorations from wood, drawing on half-remembered orc traditions. Jacob built furniture, sturdy chairs, and a proper bed frame. They acquired a cattle-dog mix that someone had abandoned, and he became their constant companion. Life was not perfect. There were still people who whispered when they went to town together. Still occasional hostility from strangers. But they had found a place where they could exist together without constant fear, and that was more than enough. In their third spring on the ranch, Hattie discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly, missed courses and morning sickness that she at first attributed to something she ate. When she finally admitted the possibility, joy and terror hit her in equal measure. She told Jacob one evening after supper, stumbling over the words. He stared at her for a long moment, processing, and then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. "A baby," he said. "We are having a baby, if you want to," Hattie said quickly. "I know we never really talked about children, and I understand if this is not what you planned." Jacob crossed the cabin in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Are you kidding? This is wonderful. This is everything." He pulled back to look at her face. "Unless you do not want this, if you are not ready, we can figure something out." "I want this," Hattie said, her voice breaking. "I want your child. I want our family. I am just scared." "What are you scared of?" "That the baby will be obviously half orc, that people will reject them the way they have rejected me, that we will be bringing a child into a world that will not accept them." Jacob cupped her face in his hands. "Our child will be strong and loved and raised by 2 people who will teach them to be proud of who they are. Yes, the world might be unkind sometimes, but they will have us, and they will have a home, and they will know they are wanted. That is more than a lot of children get." Hattie nodded, letting his words soothe her fears. He was right. Their child would be loved fiercely and completely. That would have to be enough. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Hattie did not know what normal was for a half-human, half-orc baby. There was no one to ask, no records of such children that she knew of. She worked through most of it, refusing to be treated as fragile, though Jacob fussed over her constantly. Ruth helped when the time came, serving as midwife. The labor was long and difficult, Hattie's body struggling to bring the baby into the world. Jacob stayed by her side the entire time, letting her grip his hand hard enough to bruise, speaking soft encouragement even when he looked terrified. When their daughter finally arrived, small and squalling and perfect, Hattie and Jacob both wept. She had Jacob's gray eyes but Hattie's green-tinted skin, just a shade paler than her mother. Her ears were slightly pointed but not as pronounced as a full orc's. She was beautiful and healthy, and theirs. They named her Hope because that was what she represented. Hope for a better future. Hope that love could bridge divides. Hope that the next generation might live in a kinder world. Raising Hope was the hardest and most rewarding thing either of them had ever done. She was a fussy baby, colicky and demanding, but she was also curious and alert, watching everything with those keen gray eyes. As she grew, her mixed heritage became more obvious. Her skin remained green-tinted, and small tusks appeared when she began teething. But she also had Jacob's smile and Hattie's determination. The ranch community mostly embraced Hope, though there were a few who muttered about abominations and unnatural unions. Martin shut down that talk quickly and firmly, making it clear that anyone who could not be respectful to the child could find work elsewhere. 2 hands left. The rest stayed and eventually came around, won over by Hope's infectious laugh and fearless personality. When Hope was 3, another family arrived at the ranch, refugees from the south. A human man and an orc woman like Jacob and Hattie, fleeing persecution. They had a young son, half-orc like Hope, and the 2 children became immediate friends. Suddenly, Hattie and Jacob were not the only mixed couple, not the only ones navigating the challenges of raising half-orc children in a largely unwelcoming world. The 2 families became close, supporting each other through the difficulties and celebrating the joys together. They built a community within the community, a small pocket of acceptance and understanding. Other mixed couples heard about the ranch and its tolerant environment, and more arrived over time. It was never a large group, but it was enough to make Hattie feel less alone, less like an aberration. Years passed. Hope grew into a smart, capable girl who loved horses as much as her parents did. She learned to read from Jacob and learned orc songs and stories from Hattie, embracing both sides of her heritage. She faced cruelty sometimes, from kids in town or strangers who stared. But she also had a solid foundation of love and belonging that helped her weather those storms. Jacob and Hattie continued working the ranch, their skills only improving with time. Martin eventually made them partners in the operation, recognizing that they had been instrumental in making the ranch successful. They bought land adjacent to the ranch and started building their own homestead, something permanent and solid for their family. The new house was larger than their cabin, with multiple rooms and real glass windows. Jacob built it with the same care he had put into his first homestead, but this time Hattie was beside him at every step, their daughter playing nearby. When they finally moved in, it felt like a culmination of everything they had fought for. On a cool autumn evening, 15 years after Hattie had taken shelter in Jacob's storm cellar during that long-ago tornado, they sat on the porch of their completed house, watching Hope and her friends play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jacob asked, his arm around Hattie's shoulders. "I was terrified," Hattie admitted. "I did not know whose cellar I was breaking into. I thought I might be arrested or worse when you found me." "I was terrified too," Jacob said. "I came home to find my barn destroyed and thought someone was trapped and dying in my cellar. When I opened that door and saw you alive, I felt this overwhelming relief. I did not care that you were an orc. I just cared that you were okay." "That was the moment everything changed," Hattie said softly. "That was when I started to hope that maybe the world could be different than I thought, because you looked at me and saw a person, not a monster. You were never a monster. You were always just Hattie, brave and strong and beautiful." She leaned into him, comfortable with his warmth and presence. "We built something good here, did we not? We built something amazing. A home, a family, a life." Hope ran up to the porch then, breathless and laughing. "Mama, Papa, come play with us. We are playing hide and seek." "Your father is too old for hide and seek," Jacob said with mock seriousness. "Am not," Hope protested. "Come on." Jacob looked at Hattie, who smiled and stood. "Come on, old man. Let us show these children how it is done." They joined the game as the sun continued to set, running and hiding and laughing with their daughter and her friends. It was a simple moment, unremarkable in many ways, but it was everything they had fought for, everything they had risked and sacrificed to achieve. The freedom to love each other openly, the safety to raise their child without constant fear, the joy of belonging, not just to each other but to a community that accepted them. That night, after Hope was asleep and the house was quiet, Hattie and Jacob lay in their bed, holding hands in the darkness. "Thank you," Hattie whispered. "For what?" "For being brave enough to love me, for defending me when others would not, for choosing me even when it cost you everything." "It did not cost me everything," Jacob corrected gently. "It cost me some things, but it gave me so much more. It gave me you and Hope and this life we have built. I would not trade any of it." "I love you," Hattie said. "I will love you until the day I die. I love you too. And I will keep loving you even after that." They fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had countless nights before and would countless nights to come. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying no threat of storms or tornadoes. The world beyond their homestead was still complicated, still often unkind to mixed couples and half-orc children. But here, in this place they had built together, there was peace. The storm cellar where they first met was hundreds of miles away now, probably being used by the new owners of that land, storing their own provisions against future disasters. But the shelter it had provided that day went far beyond protection from a tornado. It had been the beginning of everything, the moment two lonely souls found each other in the darkness and decided to face the world together. And they had faced it, weathered every storm that came their way, and emerged stronger on the other side. Not unchanged. The challenges had left their marks, made them tougher and more careful and occasionally more cynical about human nature. But they had also learned about resilience, about the power of love to sustain through hardship, about the importance of choosing joy even when the world offered reasons to despair. As morning came, bringing with it another day of work and family and the small satisfactions of a life well lived, Hattie woke to find Jacob already up, making coffee in the kitchen. She joined him, wrapping her arms around him from behind, and he leaned back into her embrace. "Good morning, wife," he said. "Good morning, husband," she replied, and it was a good morning like so many others they had shared and would share in the years to come. Not perfect, never perfect, but good. Real. Theirs. Built on the foundation of a choice they had made to love each other despite every obstacle, to fight for their right to be together, to create something beautiful out of the wreckage of a storm. They had found each other in a cellar during a tornado, two people seeking shelter from different kinds of storms. And together, they had built a home that could withstand anything. That was their story, their triumph, their happy ending. Not because life became easy or the world became kind, but because they faced it all together, hand in hand, heart to heart, for all the days of their lives.